The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian and floating crystal platforms. Light from a dying red star filtered through the massive viewport, casting long shadows across the faces of 200 alien delegates. They had gathered here on Volantos Prime, a neutral station at the edge of known space, to discuss matters of trade, territory, and war. But today, they had come to watch something far more entertaining. They had come to watch a human beg. Ambassador Kevin Moore stood alone on the speaking platform, a small figure surrounded by creatures that towered over him. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had bodies made of pure energy contained in magnetic shells. All of them looked at him with the same expression. It was the look one might give to a child who had wandered into a room full of adults and demanded to be heard. Kevin was 53 years old. He had gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that came from years of difficult negotiations. He had served Earth for 3 decades, first as a trade representative, then as a diplomat, and now as humanity's sole voice among the stars. He had faced hostile boardrooms and angry crowds. He had survived 2 assassination attempts. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. He cleared his throat and spoke into the translation device that hung around his neck. His words would be converted into 1,000 languages and broadcast to every delegate in the chamber. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he began, keeping his voice steady. "I come before you today to request military assistance. 3 days ago, the Vorn hegemony attacked our colony on Eridan 4. They came without warning. They gave no demands. They simply began killing." He paused and looked around the chamber. A few delegates shifted in their seats. Most did not move at all. "The colony had a population of 400,000 people," Kevin continued. "Farmers, teachers, children. The Vorn have already destroyed 3 of our outer settlements. We estimate that 60,000 humans have died in the past month alone. We do not have the ships to stop them. We are asking for help." Silence filled the chamber. Kevin waited. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment. He had memorized the Council's procedures. He had studied the political relationships between the major species. He had called in every favor that humanity had earned in its 87 years among the stars. The silence stretched on for 10 long seconds. Then it was broken by laughter. High Speaker Zorath rose from his seat on the upper platform. He was Kithrani, a species of reptilian predators who had ruled their sector for 10,000 years. His scales were deep green, almost black, and his eyes glowed with a cold yellow light. When he laughed, it sounded like stones grinding together. "Military assistance," Zorath repeated, his voice dripping with amusement. "The humans want military assistance." More laughter rippled through the chamber. Kevin felt his jaw tighten, but he did not look away. "Tell me, Ambassador," Zorath continued, descending from his platform on a gravity lift. "How long has your species been traveling among the stars? 80 years? 90? 87 years, Kevin said quietly. 87 years. Zorath spread his clawed hands wide, addressing the entire council. "My species has been building starships for 11,000 years. The Drellians have been doing so for 8,000. Even the youngest member of this council, the Filori Collective, has been spacefaring for over 2,000 years. And you come here, after less than a century, asking us to fight your wars for you?" The Drellian ambassador, a thin creature with silver skin and 4 arms, rose from her seat. "Perhaps the humans should return to their mud world and wait another 1,000 years before speaking to this council again." Laughter erupted once more. Kevin stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back. A delegate from the Varashi Combine leaned forward. "I am curious, Ambassador. How many ships does Earth actually have? 50? 100? Our patrol fleet numbers approximately 120 vessels. Kevin said. This produced the loudest laughter yet. Even species that rarely showed emotion seemed amused. 120 ships, the Varashi delegate said. The Vorn hegemony has 800 vessels in their assault fleet alone. What exactly did you expect us to do? Sacrifice our own people to save a species that cannot even defend itself? Kevin looked around the chamber one more time. He saw the faces of delegates from species that humanity had traded with. Species that had visited Earth. Species that had signed treaties promising friendship and cooperation. Not one of them would meet his eyes. I understand, Kevin said. His voice was calm, but something in it made a few delegates stop laughing. I want to make sure I understand correctly. Earth is asking for help. We are asking the Galactic Council to honor the principles of mutual defense that this body claims to uphold. And your answer is no. High Speaker Zorvith stepped closer to Kevin. He was nearly 3 meters tall, and he had to bend down to look the human in the eye. Let me be clear with you, Ambassador. Earth is a minor world on the edge of explored space. Your species is young, weak, and insignificant. The Vorn have chosen to take your colonies, and that is simply the way of the galaxy. The strong survive. The weak do not. If you cannot protect your own people, then perhaps you do not deserve to keep them. Kevin held the alien's gaze without flinching. I see. Go home, little human, Zorvith said. By the time your primitive fleet reaches Eridan 4, there will be nothing left but ashes. And no one in this chamber will shed a single tear. Kevin nodded slowly. He reached up and removed a translation device from around his neck. He held it in his hand for a moment, looking at it as if seeing it for the first time. High Speaker Zorvith, he said, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember what you said here today. I want you to remember that Earth came to this council asking for help, and you laughed at us. Zorvith bared his teeth in what passed for a smile among his kind. And why should I remember this moment? Kevin looked up at him with eyes that had gone cold and hard. Because Earth is going to remember it. And we have very long memories. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the laughter resumed, louder than before. Someone shouted something about humans running away. Someone else made a joke about primitive species and their delusions of importance. Kevin did not look back. He walked through the massive doors and into the corridor beyond. A human aide was waiting for him there, a young woman named Lisa Park with worried eyes and a communication device in her hand. Ambassador, she said. What happened? What did they say? Kevin took the communication device from her. He entered a code that only 7 people on Earth knew existed. Then he spoke 4 words into the device. Protocol Omega. Wake them all. He handed the device back to Lisa, who stared at him with wide eyes. Sir, she whispered, are you sure? Kevin looked back at the closed doors of the council chamber. He could still hear the faint sound of laughter from within. They wanted to see what humanity is capable of, he said. Now they will. The Galactic Council was still in session 18 hours after Ambassador Kevin Moore had walked out of the chamber. There were trade agreements to discuss, territorial disputes to resolve, and the usual endless arguments about things that would never be settled. High Speaker Zorvith had returned to his seat on the upper platform, still pleased with himself for putting the human in his place. The first warning came from a sensor station on the outer edge of the Volanthos system. The operator was a young Drellian named Veth, and when she saw the readings on her screen, she thought her equipment must be broken. She ran a diagnostic, then ran it again. The numbers did not change. She opened a priority channel to the council chamber. This is Sensor Station 12, she said, her voice shaking. We are detecting multiple jump signatures at the main gate. Please advise. A council aide received the message and forwarded it to the chamber's communication system. Zorvith glanced at the alert with mild annoyance. How many ships? He asked, not particularly interested. Veth checked her readings one more time. "Sir, I am showing over 4,000 individual signatures." The chamber fell silent. Zorveth sat up straight in his seat. "Repeat that." 4,000 ships, sir. They are still emerging from the jump point. The count is now 4,100. 4,200. Sir, they are still coming. Every delegate in the chamber was now staring at the main view screen, which had switched to show the sensor feed from Station 12. The jump gate was lit up like a sun, and from its center poured an endless stream of vessels. They came in perfect formation, spreading across the void in patterns that spoke of long practice and careful planning. The ships were human. Kevin Moore was standing at the back of the chamber, where he had been waiting quietly since his departure had been blocked by Council security who wanted to question him further. He had spent the past 18 hours answering pointless questions and enduring more mockery from minor officials. Now he watched a view screen with an expression that revealed nothing. A council aide approached Zorveth, his voice trembling. "Hi, Speaker. We are receiving a transmission. It is broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it through," Zorveth said. The voice of Admiral Daniel Cole filled the chamber. It was calm, measured, and carried the weight of absolute authority. "This is Admiral Daniel Cole of the United Terran Fleet. We are here to relieve the human colony on Eridan 4, which is currently under attack by the Vorn hegemony. Our fleet will be passing through this system on our way to Vorn space. Any vessel that attempts to interfere with our operations will be treated as hostile and dealt with accordingly." That is all. The transmission ended. The chamber remained frozen in shock. The Drellian ambassador was the first to speak. "That is impossible. The humans only have 100 ships. Our intelligence reports confirmed this." "Your intelligence reports were wrong," Kevin said quietly from the back of the chamber. Every head turned to look at him. He walked forward slowly, passing between the floating platforms of stunned delegates until he reached the center of the chamber. "For 40 years, humanity has been building a fleet in secret," Kevin continued. "We built it in places your sensors could not reach. We crewed it with soldiers your spies never knew existed. We armed it with weapons your analysts never imagined." He looked up at Zorveth. "You thought we were weak because we asked for help. You were wrong. We asked for help because we hoped we would not have to do this alone. But we were always prepared to do it alone if we had to." Zorveth rose from his seat, his scales darkening with anger. "This is a deception. Some kind of trick. No species could hide a fleet of that size." "You are welcome to believe that," Kevin said. "But I suggest you look at your sensors again." The main view screen updated with new data. The human fleet had finished emerging from the jump point. Over 4,000 vessels now held position in the outer system, arranged in battle formations that covered thousands of cubic kilometers. At the center of the formation sat 3 ships so large that they dwarfed everything around them. They were the dreadnoughts, and their weapon systems alone carried enough firepower to devastate a planet. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge of the USS Resolute, watching the tactical display update with information about the alien station and its surrounding traffic. The Council's defensive fleet was tiny compared to what she had brought. 100 ships, maybe 150. They were not even trying to form a battle line. "Captain," Nathan Price reported from the tactical station, "the Council Defense Force is standing down. They are clearing a path through the system." Laura nodded. She had expected as much. "Maintain formation. We are not here to fight them." On the Council station, chaos had erupted. Delegates were shouting over each other, demanding explanations, calling for emergency sessions, trying to contact their home governments. Zorveth stood in the middle of it all, staring at the view screen with an expression that had shifted from anger to something that looked almost like fear. "Hi, Speaker," an aide said. "We are receiving reports from the Vorn hegemony border. The human fleet has been spotted on long-range sensors in multiple systems. They appear to be heading directly for Eridan 4. How fast are they moving? Zorvath asked. The aide checked his datapad. Their cruising speed is approximately 30% faster than our fastest warships. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Speed was one of the most closely guarded metrics of military power. The Kethrani had spent centuries developing engines that gave them a decisive advantage in battle. The humans had apparently surpassed them in less than a century. Kevin Moore watched the reactions of the delegates around him. He felt no satisfaction, only a deep weariness. This was not how he had wanted things to go. He had truly hoped that the Council would help, that humanity could work within the system, that they would not have to reveal their secrets and become a threat in the eyes of the galaxy. But the galaxy had made its choice. And now humanity would make its own. Ambassador Moore, a voice called out. It was the delegate from the Falori Collective, a species of crystalline beings that humanity had always considered relatively friendly. Why did you hide this from us? Why did you pretend to be weak? Kevin looked at the Falori delegate. Because we watched what happened to species that were strong. We watched the Kethrani conquer their neighbors. We watched the Vorn enslave entire worlds. We watched this council do nothing to stop any of it. And we decided that if we were going to survive in this galaxy, we needed to be ready to protect ourselves. He paused and looked around the chamber one more time. We came to you as friends. We asked for help as allies. You laughed at us. You told us to go home and die quietly. So now you will see what happens when you leave humanity with no other choice. The main view screen showed the human fleet beginning to move again, accelerating toward the edge of the system and the jump point that would take them to Vorn Space Dot at Eridan 4. The Vorn commander named Kethral was reviewing reports from his siege of the human colony. His ships had been bombing the surface for days, and resistance was beginning to crumble. Another week, maybe two, and the planet would be his. His communications officer interrupted him with urgent news. Commander, long-range sensors are detecting incoming vessels. Many of them. Kethral turned to the tactical display. What he saw made his blood run cold. That is impossible, he whispered. The human fleet was coming, and it was coming fast. The message traveled at the speed of light through quantum relay stations, jumping from one end of human space to the other in less than 3 seconds. It arrived at the United Terran Defense Command headquarters in Geneva at exactly 14:32 local time. The officer who received it was a young lieutenant named Scott Palmer. He read the 4 words on his screen, and his face went pale. He ran. Admiral Daniel Cole was in a meeting when Scott burst through the door. The admiral was a tall man with dark skin and white hair cut short against his skull. He had served in the Terran Navy for 41 years. He had commanded destroyers, cruisers, and carrier groups. He had seen action against pirates, smugglers, and hostile alien scouts. But he had never expected to see the message that Scott was now showing him. Protocol Omega, Daniel read aloud. Wake them all. The other officers in the room fell silent. They knew what those words meant. They had trained for this moment in secret simulations for the past 15 years. But none of them had truly believed it would ever happen. Daniel stood up from the table. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were steady as he picked up his personal communicator. He entered a code that unlocked a section of the military network that officially did not exist. This is Admiral Daniel Cole, he said. Authentication code. Sierra 77 Alpha. Protocol Omega is now active. I repeat, Protocol Omega is now active. All Omega assets are to begin deployment immediately. This is not a drill. Across the solar system, things began to happen. Deep inside the asteroid belt, a mining facility called Station Gamma suddenly went dark. Its workers, all of whom had top-secret clearances, moved to predetermined positions. Massive doors that had been hidden for decades began to open, revealing caverns filled with warships that had never seen starlight. On the far side of Luna, the surface of a crater called Mendeleev began to split apart. What had appeared to be solid rock was actually a camouflaged hangar door 3 kilometers wide. Inside, rows of destroyers and cruisers sat waiting, their crews already running to their stations, dotting the clouds of Jupiter. Where no alien probe had ever ventured, a station that existed on no official records powered up its engines. It was a shipyard, the largest humanity had ever built. And nestled in its construction bays were 3 vessels so massive that they made everything else look like toys. They were dreadnoughts, each one 5 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. The galaxy thought it knew humanity's military strength. They had seen the patrol fleet, those 120 ships that guarded Earth's trade routes and responded to emergencies. They had analyzed human technology and declared it adequate but unimpressive. They had concluded that humanity was a minor power, decades away from becoming a serious presence in galactic affairs. They were wrong. For 40 years, humanity had been building in secret. Every budget report had been falsified. Every satellite survey had been fooled. Every alien spy had been fed carefully constructed lies. The real fleet had been hidden in places where no one would think to look, crewed by soldiers who had sworn oaths of silence, armed with weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Admiral Cole had helped design that fleet. He had watched it grow from a handful of prototype vessels to the force it was today. And now, for the first time, he was going to use it. Captain Laura Bennett received her orders aboard the USS Resolute, a heavy cruiser that served as the flagship of the Third Fleet. She was in her quarters when the alert came through, reviewing crew reports and drinking her 3rd cup of coffee of the day. When she read the message, she set down her cup and took a deep breath. She was 44 years old, with red hair that she kept tied back in a tight bun and green eyes that missed nothing. She had joined the Navy at 18, served on 6 different ships, and commanded 3. She had never lost a battle. She had never lost a ship. And she had spent the last 5 years training for a war that everyone hoped would never come. She pressed the intercom button on her desk. Commander Nathan Price to the bridge. Lieutenant Amy Grant to weapons control. All senior officers to stations. This is not a drill. The ship came alive around her. She could feel the vibration of boots on deck plates as crew members ran to their positions. She could hear the distant hum of the reactor powering up to combat levels. By the time she reached the bridge, her people were ready. Nathan Price was already there, standing at the tactical station. He was a quiet man with steady hands and a mind that could calculate firing solutions faster than most computers. Amy Grant arrived moments later, sliding into the weapons console with the ease of long practice. She was the youngest officer on the bridge, barely 30 years old, but she could put a railgun round through a target at 50,000 kilometers. Captain on the bridge, Nathan announced. Laura took her seat in the command chair. The main view screen showed the blackness of space and the distant lights of other ships beginning to move. Status report, she said. All stations reporting ready, Nathan replied. Reactor at full power. Weapons charged. Navigation has the jump coordinates locked in. Laura nodded. She opened a channel to the entire ship. All hands, this is the captain. Many of you have been wondering why we've spent years training for scenarios that seemed impossible. Why we've been drilling for battles against enemies that outnumbered us 10 to 1. Why we've kept secrets from our families, our friends, and the rest of the galaxy. Now you know. The Vorn hegemony has attacked our people. The Galactic Council has refused to help. So we're going to help ourselves. She paused, letting her words sink in. In approximately 18 hours, we will engage the enemy at Eridan 4. We will face a fleet that is larger than ours. We will fight for colonists who have been waiting for rescue while the rest of the galaxy laughed at them. And we will show every species in this galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's children. She closed the channel and turned to her crew. Take us out. The Resolute began to move, joining a river of ships flowing toward the main jump gate. There were carriers the size of small cities. There were destroyers built for speed and stealth. There were troop transports carrying 300,000 Marines who had said goodbye to their families, without knowing if they would ever see them again. General Patricia Stone stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching the ground forces assemble. She was a small woman with silver hair and a scar across her jaw from a battle she never talked about. She had trained these soldiers. She had taught them how to fight and how to die. And now she was going to lead them into the largest military operation in human history. On Mars, dropships loaded with heavy equipment. On Titan, special forces teams checked their weapons one final time. On 100 stations throughout the solar system, soldiers wrote letters to loved ones and sealed them in envelopes that would only be delivered if they did not return. The fleet gathered at the jump gate. Over 4,000 vessels arranged in perfect formation. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of his command station, watching the final ships take their positions. All vessels reporting ready, his aide announced. Daniel looked at the fleet he had spent his life building. He thought about the colonists on Eridan 4, waiting for help that they had been told would never come. He thought about the council chamber and the laughter and the words of High Speaker Zorveth. Jump, he ordered. The fleet vanished into the light. 3 days after the Battle of Eridan 4, Ambassador Kevin Moore walked back into the Galactic Council chamber. He wore the same simple gray suit he had worn before. His expression was the same calm mask he always showed to the galaxy. But everything else had changed. The chamber was quieter than he had ever heard it. Delegates who had laughed at him now watched him in silence. Species that had dismissed humanity as insignificant now tracked his every movement with careful attention. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with the weight of what had happened and what might happen next. Kevin walked to the speaking platform and stood there for a moment, looking out at the assembled representatives of 200 civilizations. He thought about all the things he could say. He thought about the mockery, the dismissal, the cruelty. He thought about the 60,000 humans who had died on Eridan 4 before help could arrive. He thought about the soldiers who had given their lives to save the rest. Then he began to speak. 3 days ago, the United Terran Fleet engaged the Vaughn hegemony at Eridan 4. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Vaughn assault fleet had been destroyed. Their commander, Kethral, is now in human custody awaiting trial for war crimes. The colony has been secured, and relief operations are underway. He paused, letting the information settle over the chamber. I am not here to gloat. I am not here to threaten. I am here to explain what happens next. High Speaker Zorveth rose from his seat, but before he could speak, Kevin raised a hand. You will have your turn, High Speaker. But first, you will listen. Zorveth hesitated, then slowly sat back down. The gesture was small, but everyone in the chamber understood what it meant. The balance of power had shifted. Humanity did not want this war, Kevin continued. We came to this council asking for help because we believed in the principles this body claims to represent. Mutual defense, collective security, the protection of the innocent. Those principles meant nothing when we needed them most. So we protected ourselves. He looked directly at Zorveth. You told me that the strong survive and the weak do not. You told me that if humanity could not protect its own people, we did not deserve to keep them. I want you to understand something, High Speaker. We heard you. We understood exactly what kind of galaxy we live in, and we adapted. A murmur ran through the chamber. Kevin waited for it to fade before continuing. The fleet you saw 3 days ago is not the limit of human capabilities. It is what we were willing to show you. We have more ships. We have more weapons. We have resources that you cannot imagine and plans that you will never see. But we do not want to use them. He stepped forward, his voice softening slightly. Earth does not seek revenge against this council. We do not intend to punish the species that refuse to help us. We understand that you made your decisions based on the information you had at the time. You thought we were weak. You thought we could not defend ourselves. You were wrong, but we do not blame you for believing your own intelligence reports. The Drellian ambassador rose cautiously from her seat. Ambassador Moore, if humanity does not seek revenge, what do you seek? Kevin turned to face her. We seek respect. We seek to be treated as equals, not as children who wandered into the wrong room. We seek a place at the table where decisions are made, not outside the door waiting for scraps. He looked around the chamber. We have earned that place. We paid for it in blood. A long silence followed. Then, slowly, High Speaker Zorvith stood again. His scales had lost some of their dark color, and his voice lacked the arrogance it had held before. Ambassador Moore, he said, the Kethrani Dominion formally apologizes for the words spoken in this chamber. We underestimated humanity. We dismissed your concerns. We failed in our duty as members of this council. He paused, and what came next seemed to cost him a great deal of pride. We were wrong. Other delegates began to stand. The Drellian ambassador apologized on behalf of her people. The Varashi Combine expressed regret for their mockery. The Falori Collective offered immediate trade negotiations. One by one, species that had laughed at humanity now sought to make amends. Kevin listened to each apology without expression. When they had finished, he nodded slowly. Earth accepts your words. We are willing to move forward. We are willing to work with this council to build a better galaxy for all species. But I want to be clear about one thing. His voice hardened just slightly. We will never again come to you as beggars. We will never again ask for protection that we should have been given freely. If our people are threatened, we will respond. If our colonies are attacked, we will strike back. The galaxy has seen what we can do. We hope it will never need to see it again. He stepped back from the speaking platform. I have nothing more to say. The council may proceed with its business. He walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. No one tried to stop him. No one made any jokes. Outside the chamber, Lisa Park was waiting for him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Sir, she said, that was incredible. Kevin shook his head. It was necessary. There's a difference. His personal communicator buzzed. He checked it and saw a message from Captain Laura Bennett aboard the Resolute. He opened the channel. Ambassador Moore, Laura's voice said, we are beginning our journey back to Earth. The colony is secure. The survivors are being evacuated to medical facilities. The Vorm prisoners are under guard. She paused. Did we win, sir? Kevin thought about the question for a long moment. He thought about the dead on both sides. He thought about the colonists who had spent weeks believing that no one was coming to save them. He thought about the galaxy watching, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Captain, he said finally, winning would have meant that none of this had to happen. It would have meant that the council helped us when we asked. It would have meant that no one had to die. He looked out the viewport at the stars, at the distant lights that represented 100 billion worlds and 1,000 different species. We survived, Captain. And for now, that is enough. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Lara spoke again, her voice quiet but steady. Understood, sir. We are coming home. The channel closed. Kevin stood there for a while longer, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the human fleet was making its way back to Earth. Somewhere out there, colonists were rebuilding their shattered lives. Somewhere out there, other species were looking at humanity with new eyes, seeing not the primitive mud world they had dismissed, but a civilization that had endured and grown and risen to meet its greatest challenge. The galaxy would never be the same. The Council would never forget what it had witnessed, and humanity would never again be underestimated. Kevin allowed himself a small smile. Then he turned and walked away, ready to face whatever came next. The story of Earth was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The sun was rising over the burning city of New Providence when the human fleet translated into the Aridan system. The colonists, who had survived weeks of bombardment, looked up from their bunkers and shelters and saw something they had stopped believing was possible. The sky was filling with ships, and those ships were theirs. Commander Kethral of the Vorn Hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide, and watched his tactical display with growing horror. The humans had brought over 4,000 vessels. His fleet numbered 800. The mathematics were simple and brutal. All ships formed defensive positions, he ordered. Contact Hegemony Command. Tell them we need reinforcements immediately. His communications officer shook his head. Commander, reinforcements are 3 days away. We are on our own. Kethral gripped the railing in front of him until his knuckles turned white. He had spent 15 years conquering weaker species. He had never faced an enemy that outnumbered him like this. But he was Vorn, and the Vorn did not retreat. Then we will make them pay for every kilometer, he said. Launch all fighters. Activate the defense grid. We will hold this system or die trying. On the bridge of the USS Resolute, Captain Laura Bennett studied the enemy formation through the main view screen. The Vorn ships were arranging themselves in a tight defensive sphere around the planet, using the orbital stations as anchor points. It was a solid strategy against a conventional attack, but this was not going to be a conventional attack. All ships, this is Fleet Command. Admiral Cole's voice came through the communication system. Execute attack pattern Delta 7. Vanguard Group, you have permission to engage. Laura leaned forward in her chair. Nathan, what do we have? Commander Nathan Price highlighted targets on the tactical display. The Vorn have concentrated their heavy cruisers in the upper hemisphere. Their carriers are hanging back near the fourth moon. Their flagship is in the center of the formation, protected by a screen of destroyers. Then that is where we go, Laura said. Amy, charge all weapons. Full power to forward shields. We are going straight through. Lieutenant Amy Grant's fingers flew across her console. Weapons hot, Captain. Railguns loaded. Plasma lances at full charge. The Resolute surged forward, leading a wedge of 50 cruisers directly at the heart of the Vorn formation. Behind them, the rest of the Vanguard spread out in a pattern designed to hit the enemy from multiple angles at once. The Vorn opened fire first. Beams of superheated plasma streaked across the void, smashing into human shields and scoring armor plates. A destroyer on the Resolute's left flank took a direct hit to its engine section and began to drift, flames pouring from its wounds. Laura did not flinch. Return fire. All batteries. The Resolute's railgun spoke, sending tungsten projectiles accelerating to a significant fraction of light speed. The first salvo struck a Vorn cruiser amidships, punching through its armor and detonating its reactor. The ship vanished in a ball of white fire. All around the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships cut through the Vorn formation with surgical precision, targeting critical systems and exploiting weaknesses that the enemy had never thought to defend. The Vorn were fierce warriors, but they had grown used to fighting enemies who were afraid of them. The humans were not afraid. Enemy carrier at bearing 047, Nathan reported. It is launching fighters. Task Force 7. Intercept those fighters, Lavra ordered. We continued toward the flagship. A wave of human interceptors broke off from the main formation and engaged the Vorn fighters in a swirling dogfight. Explosions lit up the darkness between the stars as both sides took losses. But the humans had trained for this, had practiced these maneuvers in thousands of simulations. Their pilots were better, their ships were faster, and their weapons were deadlier. On the surface of Eridan 4, General Patricia Stone's dropships punched through the atmosphere in a rain of fire. The Vorn ground forces had not expected a landing so soon. They had assumed the space battle would last for days. They were wrong. The dropships touched down in the ruins of New Providence, their ramps dropping before they had even stopped moving. Marines poured out into the streets, their weapons already firing. The Vorn soldiers who had been looting the city found themselves caught between advancing humans and the colonists, who had suddenly found reasons to fight back. Patricia stood in her command vehicle, watching feeds from dozens of helmet cameras. 1st Battalion, push east toward the hospital. 2nd Battalion, secure the power station. 3rd Battalion, find me survivors. A Marine sergeant named Kyle Brooks led his squad through the shattered remains of a residential district. Bodies lay in the streets. Buildings had been reduced to rubble. But here and there, he saw signs of life. People peering out from basement windows. Children huddled in doorways. "We are here to help," he called out. "We are Terran Marines. The fleet is here. You are going to be okay." A woman emerged from a collapsed building, carrying a baby in her arms. Her face was covered in dust and tears. "We thought no one was coming," she said. "They told us no one was coming." Kyle put a hand on her shoulder. They were wrong. In orbit, the battle was reaching its climax. The Vorn flagship, the Crushing Tide, had been cut off from the rest of its fleet. The human dreadnought Defiance had positioned itself directly in its path, blocking any hope of escape. Commander Kethrel stared at the massive vessel on his view screen and knew that he had lost. "Commander," his first officer said, "we should retreat. There may still be time to reach the jump point." Kethrel shook his head slowly. "There is no retreat from this. The humans will not let us go. And even if they did, what would I tell the hegemony? That I ran from primitives?" He straightened his uniform and turned to face his crew. "All hands, prepare for final assault. We will ram the human flagship if we must. We will not surrender." The Crushing Tide accelerated toward the Defiance, its weapons firing continuously. But the human dreadnought's shields held, and its return fire was overwhelming. Beam after beam struck the Vorn flagship, tearing through its armor and silencing its guns one by one. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Bennett watched the enemy flagship begin to break apart. "Kethral's ship is disabled," Nathan reported. "They are launching escape pods. Should we intercept?" Lavra thought for a moment. "No, let them go." But the flagship itself boarded. "I want Kethrol alive." Boarding craft launched from half a dozen human ships, converging on the crippled Vorn vessel. Marines in heavy armor cut through bulkheads and fought their way toward the bridge. Kethrol was found standing alone in the wreckage, a weapon in his hand. He fired twice, killing one Marine, before he was overwhelmed and restrained. By the time the sun reached its highest point in the sky above New Providence, the battle was over. 500 Vorn ships had been destroyed. Another 200 had surrendered. The rest had scattered into deep space, fleeing for their lives. Human losses were 47 ships. 1,612 dead. It was a victory, but no one on the Resolute was celebrating. Admiral Cole's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, secure from battle stations. Begin rescue and recovery operations. Medical ships, Proceed to the surface immediately. Lavra leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Around her, the bridge crew worked in silence, their faces showing the exhaustion of those who have seen too much death in too short a time. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "the colonists are sending a message." Lavra opened her eyes. "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge, rough with emotion. "This is Mayor Greg Collins of New Providence. We do not know how to thank you. We thought we were going to die here. We thought everyone had forgotten us." Lavra found her voice. "Mayor Collins, this is Captain Laura Bennett of the USS Resolute. No one forgot you. We came as fast as we could." There was a long pause. Then the mayor spoke again. "Welcome to Aridin 4, Captain. Welcome home."